If your portfolio looks like a medicine cabinet, you're probably an investor. But in today's market, it's not just about holding the big names like Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson. There's a whole world of smaller, lesser-known pharmaceutical companies out there, each with their own unique stories, risks, and, potentially, rewards. Maybe you're the type who likes to hunt for the next big thing, or maybe you're just curious about what's bubbling under the surface in the pharma sector. Either way, you've probably noticed that the world of pharmaceutical stocks is as complex and varied as the medicines themselves. From companies working on cutting-edge gene therapies to those tackling age-old problems like antibiotic resistance, the opportunities and the risks are everywhere. So, let's take a closer look at 5 pharma stocks you might not have heard of: CERO, ACXP, PCSA, Verve, and EYEN. Are they worth a spot in your portfolio, or should you steer clear? Let's dive in and find out. If you've never heard of CERO or ACXP, you're not alone. These aren't household names, and you won't see their commercials during the Super Bowl. But sometimes, the companies flying under the radar are the ones with the most potential for explosive growth, or of course, the most risk. The pharmaceutical industry is notorious for its high barriers to entry, long development timelines, and the ever-present threat of regulatory hurdles. But it's also an industry where a single breakthrough can change everything, both for patients and for investors. So, what exactly do these companies do, and why are some investors starting to pay attention? But should you add them to your watch list? Let's break it down. When you're considering a pharmaceutical stock, it's not just about the science, it's about the story. What unmet medical need are they addressing? How big is the potential market? What stage are their drugs in? Do they have enough cash to get through clinical trials? And perhaps most importantly, what are the chances that their treatments will actually make it to market? These are the questions that separate the winners from the also-rans in the world of biotech investing. So, let's take a closer look at each of these 5 companies, starting with CERO. First up, CERO, CervoMed. They're working on drugs for neurodegenerative diseases, and with an aging population, that's a big market. Neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are some of the most devastating conditions out there, both for patients and their families. The need for effective treatments is enormous, and as the global population continues to age, that need is only going to grow. CervoMed is focusing on developing therapies that could slow or even halt the progression of these diseases, which would be a game changer for millions of people worldwide. Their lead candidate is currently in early-stage clinical trials, and while the results so far are promising, it's still a long road ahead. The company is betting that its unique approach to targeting the underlying mechanisms of neurodegeneration will set it apart from the competition. But as with any early-stage biotech, there are significant risks. Clinical trials are expensive, time-consuming, and often end in disappointment. Still, if CervoMed's science holds up, the potential rewards could be enormous, not just for investors but for society as a whole. But remember, early-stage pharma is high risk, high reward. For every success story, there are dozens of companies that never make it past the clinical trial stage. The volatility can be stomach-churning, and it's not uncommon to see these stocks swing wildly on the back of a single press release or clinical update. If you're thinking about investing in a company like CervoMed, you need to be prepared for a bumpy ride. It's not for the faint of heart, but for those willing to take the risk. The payoff can be substantial. Just make sure you're not betting more than you can afford to lose. Now let's talk about ACXP, or Acurx Pharmaceuticals. This company is all about tackling one of the biggest threats to modern medicine: antibiotic resistance. You've probably heard the warnings. If we don't develop new antibiotics, we could be heading for a post-antibiotic era, where even minor infections become deadly. Acurx is developing a new class of antibiotics designed to overcome resistance and treat infections that no longer respond to existing drugs. Their lead candidate is currently in clinical trials, and early data suggests it could be effective against some of the most dangerous superbugs out there. The company's approach is innovative, targeting bacterial cell division in a way that makes it harder for resistance to develop. If they succeed, it could be a major breakthrough, not just for patients, but for the entire healthcare system. If their pipeline delivers, hospitals everywhere will thank them, and so might your portfolio. The market for new antibiotics is huge, and the need is urgent. Hospitals are desperate for new options to treat resistant infections, and governments around the world are starting to offer incentives for companies that can deliver. But as with any biotech, there are no guarantees. The path from promising data to approved drug is long and fraught with obstacles. Still, Acurx is one to watch if you believe in the future of antibiotic innovation. But clinical trial success is never guaranteed. Even the most promising drugs can stumble in the final stages, and setbacks are common. Regulatory agencies like the FDA have high standards, and a single unexpected side effect can derail years of work. For investors, this means that patience and a strong stomach are essential. It's important to keep an eye on the data, understand the risks, and be prepared for the possibility that things might not go as planned. Next up is PCSA, Processa Pharmaceuticals. This company is focused on developing therapies for rare diseases, also known as orphan diseases. These are conditions that affect a small percentage of the population, but for those who suffer from them, the impact can be life-changing. The market for rare disease treatments is smaller than for more common conditions, but it can be incredibly lucrative. That's because there's often little to no competition, and regulatory agencies are sometimes willing to offer incentives like faster approval timelines and market exclusivity. Processa is working on several candidates targeting different rare diseases, and their approach is to repurpose existing drugs with new formulations or delivery methods. This can sometimes speed up development and reduce costs, but it's still a challenging path. These markets can be lucrative, but getting FDA approval is no walk in the park. The regulatory process is rigorous, and even small missteps can lead to costly delays. For rare disease drugs, the stakes are high, both for the company and for the patients who are waiting for new treatments. Processa's strategy of targeting unmet needs in the rare disease space could pay off if they can navigate the regulatory maze. But as always, there are no guarantees in biotech. Investors need to be prepared for the ups and downs that come with the territory. Now let's turn to Verve, or Verve Therapeutics. This company is at the forefront of gene editing, aiming to cure heart disease with a single treatment. Imagine a world where a single injection could permanently lower your cholesterol and eliminate your risk of heart attack. That's the vision that Verve is working toward, using cutting-edge CRISPR technology to edit the genes responsible for high cholesterol. Their approach is still in the early stages, but the science is incredibly exciting. If they can pull it off, it would be a revolution in cardiovascular medicine. The potential market is massive. Heart disease is the leading cause of death worldwide, and current treatments often require lifelong medication. A one-and-done gene therapy would be a game-changer, both for patients and for the healthcare system as a whole. But remember, the road from lab to pharmacy shelf is long and expensive. Developing a new gene therapy isn't just about the science. It's about raising enough money to fund years of research, clinical trials, and regulatory submissions. The costs can run into the hundreds of millions, and there's always the risk that something will go wrong along the way. For investors, this means that patience is key. It can take a decade or more for a new therapy to make it to market, and there are no shortcuts. But for those willing to wait, the rewards can be substantial. Verve is a high-risk, high-reward play, and it's not for everyone. But if you believe in the future of gene editing, it's a company worth watching. Finally, let's talk about EYEN, Eyenovia. This company wants to revolutionize eye care with microdosing technology. If you've ever used eye drops, you know how tricky it can be to get the right amount into your eye. Eyenovia's technology delivers precise, tiny doses of medication, reducing side effects and improving outcomes. They're targeting conditions like glaucoma and dry eye, which affect millions of people worldwide. The company's lead product is already approved for use in eye exams, and they're working on expanding into other indications. If they can prove that their technology works for chronic conditions, it could change the way we treat eye diseases forever. If they nail it, they could change how we treat eye diseases forever. The market for eye care is huge, and there's a real need for better, more convenient treatments. Eyenovia's technology has the potential to make a big impact. But as with all early-stage companies, there are risks. The company will need to prove that its products are safe, effective, and commercially viable. But if they succeed, the rewards could be significant. So, what's the bottom line? Investing in small-cap pharmaceutical stocks is not for everyone. These companies are working on some of the most exciting and potentially transformative technologies in medicine, but they're also facing enormous challenges. The path from the lab bench to the pharmacy shelf is long, expensive, and uncertain. For every company that succeeds, there are many more that fall by the wayside. But for those willing to do their homework, take calculated risks, and be patient, the potential rewards can be substantial. These stocks have promise, but they're not for the faint of heart. Volatility is the name of the game, and you need to be prepared for the possibility of big swings, both up and down. It's important to have a clear investment thesis, set realistic expectations, and be willing to cut your losses if things don't go as planned. Diversification is key, and it's never a good idea to put all your eggs in one basket, especially in a sector as unpredictable as biotech. Do your homework, diversify, and remember, in pharma, patience pays. Sometimes it pays off in a big way, with a blockbuster drug that changes the world. Other times it just means waiting, and waiting, for the next clinical update or regulatory decision. The key is to stay informed, manage your risk, and never invest more than you can afford to lose. The world of pharmaceutical investing is full of excitement, uncertainty, and opportunity. Whether you're a seasoned biotech investor or just starting to explore the sector, there's always something new to learn, and new companies to watch. So keep your eyes open, stay curious, and who knows, the next big breakthrough might just be hiding in your medicine cabinet or your portfolio.